Please note that the views and opinions expressed by the host of this podcast are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of any guests.
There were times I can remember from my early childhood where I saw my parents get taken advantage of because of their lack of understanding of the English language, or because of their lack of understanding of American customs and etiquette, or whatever it is, right? And a lot of boundaries that I saw them go through, or my family in general go through. I saw my brother couldn't go to college, right? Because we couldn't afford it, because he couldn't qualify for federal student aid, right? I experienced that, right? You're growing up and seeing my friends getting jobs and being like, oh, I want to get a job too, and realizing, oh, I can't, right? And seeing the obstacles my parents faced. And I just remember so bad wishing they had someone there to help them advocate, to help them overcome these obstacles, to help them fix these problems so that they could live a normal freaking life like our neighbors. And I wanted to be that for people. And that's what really drove me to pursue this profession.
Immigration, a conversation as old as America herself. Today, we take some time to dive deep into that conversation. Immigration attorney Eduardo Herrera joins the show to discuss the recent ICE raids in LA and the protests they sparked nationwide. This is Speakeasy, and these are the Sidebar sessions. All right, welcome to the first of hopefully many sidebar conversations we're going to be having on the podcast. We have a very special guest with us today, so I'll let you introduce yourself, Eddie, if you want to tell the people who you are and what it is you do, and that'll sort of give a lead into this conversation.
Yeah, sure. I'm Eddie. I work at a nonprofit organization that does immigration and refugee work. I'm a manager there. I also practice immigration law there, and yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for donating some of your time to us here on the podcast today. Obviously in the studio with also my two co-hosts, Matt and Luis.
Yo, what's up?
You have a special relationship with this guy over here, right, Luis?
Yeah, Luis is my brother. Yeah, we grew up together in the same household.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, we'll get into this conversation. As you guys can see from the title, this is not a surprise, or it's not like a hidden or secret meaning behind this conversation. This is going to be about the recent immigration, I don't even know what to label it, explosion that happened in the U.S. here over the last few weeks. There has been some crazy stuff that's been going on, specifically in L.A., and then it's sort of eked into other parts of the country. But I wanted to start at the top here and just go into a little bit about these sort of ICE raids. So ICE, I forget what the acronym stands for, something Immigration
and Customs Enforcement.
There we go. All right, so there's always been sort of raids happening, but during his campaign for president, Donald Trump announced that there would be deportations, mass deportations, that we've never, like this country has never seen before. Mm-hmm. He's going to take this very seriously, get rid of all of these quote illegal immigrants. And so far, the number of undocumented workers undocumented immigrants that have been deported has been a little bit lower than what we've seen in recent years. So for context, if the current pace continues, there will be about 500,000 undocumented immigrants deported this year, which is much lower than the 700,000 plus that were deported in 2024 during the Biden administration. So there's a lot of different reasons why that number is much lower. Some research that I did showed that there was much more at the southern border. There were much more aggressive steps moving forward to stop immigrants from coming into the country. But basically, Donald Trump isn't going to be able to deliver on this promise. So there have been conversations, some public, some private, about increasing the number of deportations that happen, and that has been sort of portrayed as a quota, I guess. So the Trump administration has thrown out some crazy numbers. They talked about 10 million plus deportations over the course of the year, which would be insane. But anyway, so yeah, that sort of brought on this idea of quotas. And like I said, there's been some public on Fox News. There's been some people talking about like a set number, 3,000 a day they've thrown out there publicly. So with that, when you put a quota on something, I think that's where things get a little sticky. Because the through line from the Trump administration has been, we're only going to deport the sort of heinous criminals, the people who are violent criminals and who, no one would object to them being deported. If you put a quota on that, though, in my opinion, at least, what happens when you don't have enough heinous criminals to deport? You start to deport people who maybe don't deserve to be deported. That also leads into this thing that they call collateral arrests, which are basically if we're going after someone who we know is a violent criminal, we arrest them. And if they happen to have family members near them who aren't violent criminals, they also end up getting arrested and deported just by proximity, basically. So that's a big thing that's been happening with the administration. There's also been talks now that, criminal, quote unquote, can mean just being in the country illegally, because that is a criminal act. Working without the proper paperwork is a criminal act. So that sort of reasoning of heinous and violent criminals has been sort of diluted down to just anybody who is here illegally, because by the book they are a criminal. So yeah, that's basically what is the cause of these raids that have been amped up since the Trump administration has started. So just a little bit of background there. Eddie, I wanted to throw it to you, because as someone who works in this very closely, like, what changes have you seen to the immigration process since the current administration started?
Yeah, I mean the changes have been many and almost weekly. I remember during the first Trump administration, like Fridays were a big thing, because every time Friday 5 p.m. a huge new immigration policy thing would drop, and we'd all be scrambling that afternoon and over the weekend and Monday morning to like pick back up and figure out what was going to change, what was going to happen.
Yeah.
So it's been like that almost again, like almost weekly. There's a new immigration policy or big thing that comes into effect. And it's just ever changing immigration law. I mean, one of the reasons is because it's really the majority of immigration law is kind of comes out through executive action, right? It's part of the executive power, and it comes out through regulation. So everyone under the DHS serves under regulation, and that regulation comes from the executive, right? We have our immigration laws that are like determined by Congress, but a lot of like how to construe and implement those laws goes through regulatory actions. Right. And so really the executive has a lot of power in this landscape to be able to adjust those regulations, create new regulations. And so that's why we see so many changes happening week after week after week. And it really plays into the administration's like playbook of how they're going about not only with immigration, but like things in general. Right. Their practice is sort of to create chaos. Right. And implement new policies or drop big news that's going to distract people or get people riled up. Right. So, one day they say, oh, well, we're going to strip away student visas from hundreds of thousands of students here studying lawfully. Right. And so everyone gets riled up about this. The nonprofits start to organize. They're saying this is outrageous. We're going to sue. We're going to do all these things. And the media has their attention on it. And everyone's riled up focusing on that. And meanwhile, he deports Kilmar Abrego Garcia to CICA, this mega prison in El Salvador without due process, and everyone, he kind of got away with that, right, when no one's paying attention. Then everyone realizes what he did over here, right, and they're all riled up about Kilmar, right, and the nonprofits are organizing, and the people are speaking up, and the media's on top of it, and then we've kind of forgotten about the student visa piece, right, and not as much attention's on it, right, but we're making progress over here. And then while everyone's riled up with Kilmar, he's doing some other sneaky stuff, right? Implementing a travel ban, banning citizens from 36 countries from coming into the United States, unless there's like some certain exception, right? But we all have our eyes over here. And then he gets away with implementing that, right? And then by the time we realize it, when everything's died down over here with Kilmar, we're focusing on the travel ban, and everyone's saying this is outrageous, and the nonprofits are organizing, and people are suing. And meanwhile, people stop noticing that a federal court has ordered the administration to bring Kilmar back, right? That a court of appeals has upheld that decision, that the Supreme Court of the United States has upheld that decision and ordered the administration to bring Kilmar back. And the administration is actively, for months, defying an order from the highest court in the land. But we're now focused on the travel ban and the next big thing that comes afterwards. So really, it's a pattern of like chaos that they
Smoke
do.
and mirrors,
yeah, and to move on to the next big thing and get away with their next agenda item. Meanwhile, kind of everything keeps on going in the background. We make some steps, right? Kilmar made it back to the United States just a couple weeks ago, but for the reason that they're extraditing him for criminal processing over here, right? So it's like, man,
that is, yeah. It's wild to hear it put in those terms, but it's that's exactly how it's portrayed in the media and how it feels, and it's just crazy. What is that? So in your day to day, I guess, what does that look like for you trying to help people? Like, what does that do for you as someone who works with these people directly?
Yeah, it's a lot of difficult conversations kind of about the state of things and where they're at and the power of the federal government and the power they have to change things. Right now, things are super unpredictable. I mean, and they'd gotten to a really nice state, and it happens every time there's a new administration, right, where someone with new policy, new views comes in, they express those views through regulation, and then something's changed, right? There were a lot of changes during the Biden administration as well, right? But maybe not so hostile and dramatic changes, right? Yeah. And there was still generally some predictability with the immigration laws and procedures in general. And I think recently the conversations have gotten tougher in the sense of one-on-one with clients saying like, hey, this is how it is now, right? And this is how it used to be. This kind of protection or defense from deportation that you used to qualify for, or theoretically you should qualify for, could change in a couple weeks, right? And it's a lot of learning, attending, continuing legal education classes to stay on top, following the new changes in laws, speculating as to how they're going to be interpreted, what changes are coming up, and following all the lawsuits that have been filed to either try to keep the old policies or current policies in place or to interpret, some part of the law. That's another thing with this administration that we're seeing is that they're pushing the boundaries of the immigration laws and the Constitution to levels we've never seen before, right? So suddenly they say, we're targeting criminals, right? Violent criminals. And okay, so what's a violent criminal? Like you were saying, right? At some point that becomes just criminal. At some point they start saying anyone who's in the country unlawfully is a criminal because they broke the criminal law. What we've been seeing actually too is that they're not only going for people without lawful status, but they're creating people without lawful status by ripping that lawful status away from them and then going after them, right? So like the student visa holders, they're taking away their student visas. All of a sudden they're undocumented in the United States and they're deporting them for it. Same thing with like something we call temporary protected status that they gave to people from Venezuela, Haiti, Nicaragua, different, not Nicaragua, countries like that have, civil unrest or violent political conditions going on and seeking refuge here. They granted them what's called temporary protected status under Biden and initially under Trump at the beginning of the year. They renewed that, but now they're taking that away, leaving hundreds of thousands of people without that lawful status that the government gave them, right? And then now they're undocumented and they're going to deport them.
Yeah, it's just, underhanded tactics against people who are literally here just trying to make a better life for themselves. And I heard Governor Gavin Newsom of California talking about this idea of self-deportation, where they say, hey, if you're a violent criminal, and you're here illegally, just leave, and that way there won't be any of these quote unquote collateral arrests, because we won't have to. If you're on our list and we go to your house and there's other immigrants there, you're putting them at risk because you're here and you're on our list, so they might be in danger when they don't need to be. If you just leave, we won't have to worry about those quote unquote collateral arrests. So, and apparently, like, communities have just been against that idea, just off of the basis of humanity. I guess it's like, hey, we're not gonna just, and again, the whole like violent criminal, like you were just saying, what dictates violent criminals, what dictates someone who's just a criminal, when maybe someone who isn't a violent criminal will end up on that list anyway because they're eligible for deportation because they're here illegally, which is according to this administration now, that's enough of a reason to deport them. So what's your opinion on that idea of self-deportation? Is that something you would...
No, that's a total sham. Yeah. Like it's false, and we're seeing that in the immigration courtrooms too now, right? There's these big flyers, and on the tables where the the defendants, they're called respondents in immigration court, but so everyone understands kind of where they sit down, right? They're on the tables, they're taped there, they're in the lobby, and these posters that say like, oh, self-deport, and you will not have negative immigration consequences moving forward. We'll even pay for your travel. Do it the right way, and we won't prosecute you, right? And come forward, and we'll make sure it's safe and fast, and it's bull. Yeah. I mean, you can't promise anyone there's going to be no immigration consequences, because that's that sort of aspect of the immigration law is written in like the congressional statutes, right? That the executive can't change, right? If you've been in the country unlawfully for certain periods of time and then you leave and then you try to re-enter again, you're banned. That's a 10-year ban. You cannot do it. Except for like very, very strict minor exceptions. So like, and then the promise that everything's going to be safe and dandy and they're just going to deport you fast and easy and pay for your travel and all that. Maybe they'll pay for the flight out, but I mean, as soon as you're put in like a detention center or a processing center for those places are awful, inhumane conditions. I've had clients who have gone through the criminal justice system and served lengthy criminal sentences in like, criminal prisons, who then come out and are picked up by ICE like on their release date and transferred into immigration custody, right? And they say that the immigration detention centers are far worse than places we're putting convicted criminals.
Yeah. There's so many, and I kind of, because we could go forever on this conversation if we get into sort of anecdotes, but you hear so many stories about these crazy things about immigration and how, they would rather, these convicted criminals, take these, jobs that apparently the illegal immigrants are taking rather than having people who are just here, whose only crime may be that they came here without following the official process. So speaking of the official process, I wondered if you could just talk to, because a lot of people, the pushback we get from people who are, pro Trump, the Trump administration, is that, why not just come over legally? Like, what's so hard about, doing it the quote unquote right way? So can you speak a little bit to what the immigration process looks like in general and why it may not be as easy as people think it is?
Yeah, I think the first thing to understand is that the quote unquote right way is already kind of being done by a lot of people, right? It depends on the area of immigration law, because I mean, in general, there's no way to just say, hey, I want to be a U.S. citizen and move to the United States and apply, right? The law doesn't just let you do that because you want to. In a lot of cases, there has to be some sort of basis for you to immigrate to the United States and start the immigration process. In a lot of cases, that's your family, right? Your U.S. citizen spouse or your U.S. citizen child or parent or whatever it is, right? In a lot of cases, it's to seek refuge, right? Because you've been tortured in your home country or persecuted, and you need to flee and find safety somewhere, right? That's a basis for immigrating. In some cases, there's employment, although employment doesn't typically lead to like long-term, permanent residence or citizenship here, right? But in general, you have to have some sort of basis, and for the vast majority of them, unless you are like an immediate relative, and by that I don't even mean like siblings, like parent, child, minor, spouse, fiance, those really, really close relationships, if you don't fall within those, the wait to do it the right way, like if I were to petition a brother or something, right, that wait is a 30-year wait outside of the United States at minimum until you get a visa that says, okay, you can come over now and start the process, right? For some people, they get to do that from the inside, right? Maybe they get some sort of deferred action or some action from the government that says, hey, while you wait here, we're not going to actively try to remove you in the past. But now we are seeing that, right? As long as they have like that visa pending, right? Or they might get their immigration proceedings continued over and over again to wait out that visa. But in the vast majority of cases, people are having to wait those out, outside of the country, right? And then the other aspect sort of is like with the refugees, right? The right way, that's what I think a lot of people don't understand is the way people have been doing it by presenting at the border, or crossing over into the United States, that's valid under the asylum laws. If you're seeking refuge, if you're seeking asylum, right? Which is a lot of the people that end up being deported are people who are coming here to apply for asylum, to seek refuge from their home country. And that has even been cut off. Really, what we've seen is like massive border closures and people being away once they start approaching the Arizona border on the Mexico side, right? And this chilling effect that's happening in the border that's preventing people from exercising their right to present and seek refuge. So I think it's a complicated system, and big takeaways is that like if you want to do it the right way, it's impossible, right? I mean, it's possible. It's absolutely possible. Sure. But unless you have one of those special relationships, right? Or you're applying 30, 40 years and willing to wait those 30, 40 years outside to be with your family, to live a life, that you're trying to live with your loved ones. I mean, it's there's so many like just long procedural waits, and there's other ways you can try, but those are kind of like the big three, right?
Yeah. So possible, but just probably not very probable or practical to get here. Again, what most people perceive to be the quote unquote right way. Because I think a lot of people have it in their minds that, anybody from any other country can just apply to be a U.S. citizen. And yeah, they might have to wait a little bit, but they'll get their chance if they just wait in line and wait their turn. But that's not how it works in reality. Yeah. For the vast majority of people, that's not a reality, right? There's those who do qualify under those few, and there are to credit a lot of folks, people doing it the quote unquote right way, right? But all right, let's move it along a little bit. I want to get to these protests that happened earlier this month. So just a little background here. So on Friday, June 6th, LA ICE agents, they rolled into a store apparently where they had a list of people who were selected to be deported. So they rolled up in their military uniforms and tactical gear and tactical vehicles, broad daylight, and they basically started to arrest these people and throw them in the back of vans. And again, this is in broad daylight in a very populated area. So obviously civilian bystanders see this and things go crazy. People aren't going to just let the government come and black bag people like this is some sort of like, dystopian future where you're gonna just be able to just capture people and no one's gonna say anything or look the other way. That's not how things work in real life. So yeah, civilians, bystanders started to protest, and things got a little bit crazy. So that happened on Friday, June 6th. So things started to die down. The next day, another one of these raids, Saturday, June 7th, was planned at a Home Depot, and that is sort of when the larger protest sort of exploded and things started to get crazy, and people started to take to the streets. I'm sure everybody listening to this, it was all over the news. Like, this was a big deal. So Trump federalized the National Guard, sent 2,000 troops into LA without the consent or knowledge of California Governor Gavin Newsom. And then later on, he also sent 700 Marines into the city. The idea here was to keep control, quote unquote, but according to the governor of California, things were already sort of contained. Like, these were peaceful protests, which under the First Amendment, we all have, as citizens, have the right to do. But it was this crazy scene. Things were going wild, and it sort of sparked this long sort of string of protests that are still going on currently. Maybe not as big as they were a couple of weeks ago, but things are still people are still not taking this lying down. So that's what's been all over the news. That's what prompted me to have this conversation, just so we could get a little more knowledge out there for people who may be in the dark about this. And what I wanted to ask you, Eddie, is like, so obviously we can go out and we can protest, but I think with the light being shown now on the immigration situation in this country, people want to help, people want to do things. So what would you say, what can we do, I guess, other than protest, to help people stay in this country or get in this country as citizens of this country? What can we do?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things is if you're looking to help your community, right? One of the biggest things is educate yourself, inform yourself, and then help others educate themselves and inform themselves as well, right? One of my favorite things that I've seen so far online in the midst of all this chaos is a recording of ICE trying to break into someone's apartment and trying to deport them, right? And this person recording, right, one of the their neighbor's house, and ICE out front of their neighbor's house yelling in like broken Spanish, like, "Don't open the door, ask them for a warrant, you're not required to open the door," and so that's amazing.
Yeah, right.
Is know the rights, share the rights to the people so that they can protect and defend themselves and advocate for themselves. Yes. Right. I think that's something great everyone can do to help with the community. Beyond that, yeah, just protest, peacefully protest, share news, share information. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I was going to add, like, financially, if those people that can give, what should they be giving? Where should they be giving?
Totally. Yeah. I think that's another big one is first, donate your time. If there are nonprofits, local immigration nonprofits that are doing work, that are seeking volunteers, and you speak like a rare language that they could, or you have some sort of expertise, or you have an aunt who's a physician who's willing to do like evaluations and things like that, donate your time and your resources and your skills. But if you don't have the time or the skills or resources, or the skills to donate, then find a local nonprofit that's doing this work, and donate. Even a few bucks a month makes a difference if a lot of individuals are doing that. Off the top of my head, there's AILA, the National Immigration Lawyers Association. Okay. There's a local nonprofit called the Florence Project, Florence Immigrant and Refugee Rights Project. There's a nonprofit that serves the Phoenix community called the Phoenix Legal Action Network Plan. And then there's a lot of national organizations too that you can donate, or even in California, if we have any listeners in California or other states, there's a flurry. Just look up immigration nonprofit associations, and a lot of them are doing the really hard work for the community in terms of like filing lawsuits to kind of tame the chaos and
Awesome. Yeah. We'll, for anybody listening, we'll drop the link to those organizations that you mentioned in the show notes. So we'll make it easy for you guys. That's a great follow up. So I want to get into a little bit about you specifically. So what was your sort of what was the driving force that made you get into this as a career? Obviously, this takes a lot of work. This takes a lot of schooling. What was your sort of reason for wanting to get into this line of work?
Yeah. So, for those of you avid listeners, I think my brothers kind of shared a little bit of our story before, but yeah, my parents immigrated to this country when we were really young, right? And they originally did it the right way. They came on visas, right? But circumstances in our home country made it so that it wasn't really viable or sustainable to go back, right? And so we ended up overstaying and building a life here, and kind of growing up in a really hostile state and community in terms of like how they view the immigrants. There were times I can remember from my early childhood where I saw my parents get taken advantage of because of their lack of understanding of the English language, or because of their lack of understanding of American customs and etiquette, or whatever it is, right? And a lot of boundaries that I saw them go through, or my family in general go through. I saw my brother couldn't go to college, right? Because we couldn't afford it, because he couldn't qualify for federal student aid, right? I experienced that, right? You're growing up and seeing my friends getting jobs and being like, oh, I want to get a job too, and realizing, oh, I can't, right? And seeing the obstacles my parents faced. And I just remember so bad wishing they had someone there to help them advocate, to help them overcome these obstacles, to help them fix these problems so that they could live a normal freaking life like our neighbors. And I wanted to be that for people. And that's what really drove me to pursue this profession.
Yeah, man, I think that's what people don't realize, and I don't want to speak ill of anybody that I don't know, but I think there are so many people on the opposite side of this conversation that they see undocumented citizens, and they see them and they're like, you're just a number. You're here illegally. You should go. When no one's ever just a number. There's always a story behind, regardless of who you are, how you got here, there's a story. So to just box people into just being a statistic is wild to me. Like, we're all human, and the fact that people can just be so cold about that and just be so disconnected, it just amazes me. And because a lot of these people are also they're quote unquote Christian, and it's just crazy that this country was founded on people coming here from other places, and it's just, I don't know, it upsets me. Like, honestly, since this stuff has been sort of at the forefront of the media, it's been all that I've really been able to think about, just because, like I said earlier, you see so many stories online with, obviously, like, I'm on, these guys know I'm on Reddit all the time, so I'm seeing constant posts about people's personal stories. I'm sure, like, TikTok, I'm not on TikTok, but I'm sure their TikTok is flooded with people's stories, and it's just, I don't know how you can watch these stories or read these stories and just be so cold. It's just, it blows my mind.
And that's a strategy. That's the strategy, just communication strategy and tactic to dehumanize these people, so that more people can feel okay getting on board with mass deportations. It's saying like, oh, they're violent criminals. Look at these statistics. There's, millions of them invading our country, right? And just like scoping out into the macro, so that you're not focusing on the mother who got ripped away from her 3-month-old child outside of immigration court, right? So that you're not focusing on the family who's trying to raise and support their special needs father, right? And it's getting ripped away from them, right? It's crazy, and it's working, and that's the most frustrating part, is that people are sharing these things and getting on board, and really, like, more people are paying attention to those big picture numbers and narratives than they are to these individuals' stories. And I'm so grateful for organizations like the ones I mentioned before that are running counter media campaigns to highlight the individuals, to tell these individuals' stories so that we can kind of counter that strategy. But I mean, it's there and it's working and it's effective, and it's sad.
Yeah, and it's as someone who has been anti-social media for a very long time, I do this is one of the areas where I do appreciate social media, because it allows people to share their stories and it allows people to share their experiences, and like you said, sort of combat that idea of, again, just being numbers. Like, like you said, millions of people invading our country and taking jobs from hardworking Americans and blah 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 blah. And it's just like, if you just looked a little bit deeper than that surface level statistic, you would probably be disgusted with yourself for, like, perpetuating this idea that these people are all bad. It's insane to me. I will never understand it. I will never understand how people can be comfortable with people being thrown into camps and sent back to situations that are, terrible and horrible and violent, and it just blows my mind.
And being thrown into camps where the situation, the conditions in those camps already are horrible and difficult and violent. Absolutely. I think that's one piece of the media that bothers me, that doesn't get enough attention, is that these places are horrendous and they're worse than the conditions where we're keeping our most violent criminals, like sexual predators who have done awful things to children, get treated better than immigrants whose only offense is that they overstayed their visa or stayed in the country without the permission, right? That really haven't been convicted of any crimes.
Yeah, I think that for me, like, that's definitely one of the most eye-opening things, is that you have so many people who hide behind the blankets of, oh, they're illegal, they shouldn't be here, but you don't know that person's story. Yeah, I don't want someone here who's murdered somebody. That part upsets me, but when you're doing this to families and you're completely devastating people like this, that's where it's like, you can't sit there and hide behind the veil of Christianity, because that's not what the Bible even says. I mean, I'm gonna fucking butcher it, super sorry, but Jesus didn't care that anybody's status of how you were. He even says you turn the other cheek at a murderer. You accept them because you're not the judge, jury, and executioner. So you're sitting there doing this, the people in that administration. And it really is saddening, because it's like, I'm Catholic, and when I hear you guys say this is the Christian way, I don't know what part of the Bible I missed, but it wasn't there. And seeing this, like, hearing these stories, it's like, oh, you can sit there and say, well, they're illegal. Well, do you know what that person has gone through? Do you know what they've done every day to wake up, to fend for their families? Oh, they're taking the jobs. My Uncle Felipe, for 25 years, worked a strawberry picking field, and he woke day in, day out to support his mom, my great grandma, my abuelita. And it's like, to sit there and say that someone could look at him and say, you don't deserve to be here. Well, I'm a little bit more visceral in my feelings to it, because it gets me really pissed, because it's like, nobody was there doing that with him. You're going to sit there and say he doesn't deserve it when he did everything that you're saying that they don't do. They're lazy and they don't work. No, he did. And it's like, I don't know, to me, that's when it gets really aggravating, when people hide behind those veils of they're a violent criminal, or they're here illegally, and it's aggravating, and it's really eye-opening to see, like, just from, like, your guys' side, your guys' point of view, the stories that you and your brother have. It really just, to me, is like, the Christian way is to accept each other as we are. It's, I don't know. It's aggravating.
Yeah, the bottom line is, like, as soon as you hear that they're here illegally, it's like, okay, I don't want to hear anything else. Like, that's it. Like, exactly.
Yeah, and what's crazy is that what we're seeing now is the people who are here illegally, right? Even they deserve a day in court, right? Yeah. Due process. Yeah. Due process is a basic, like, constitutional right for anyone in the United States, not just the citizens, right? Mm-hmm. And what we're seeing now is an attack on due process, right? And so these people are saying, like, oh, they're illegal, we should get them out, right? But even if you believe that, right, you should agree under the Constitution that everyone deserves a day in court. Because if someone takes away that person's due process rights, they could just as easily take away mine or yours.
No, Eddie, what are you talking about? The U.S. Constitution is only for U.S. No, it literally says all men are created equal. There's no addendum that says BT dubs, though. It's for only American citizens. So, again, it's another extremely aggravating thing where, yeah, people are spitting in the face of due process, which is everything that we base upon ourselves so that we never fell back into what we were fighting against. So it's I hate it. I absolutely, it pisses me off when people sit there and they do that.
Yeah.
They spit in the face of due process for no reason, just because it fits their agenda.
And the immigration process accounts for people to be able, even in deportation proceedings, to be able to plead defenses to deportation, right? So even if they're picked up, the problem is that right now they're being picked up and just shipped off without a day in court. Yeah. And that's horrendous, right? But had they been getting that day in court, you could apply to do things, quote unquote, the right way. There's defenses to deportation that you can apply for if you've been in this country for a really long time and you have like a qualifying relative that really needs your support, right? Or if you qualify for asylum or some sort of other protective status that would allow you to fix your immigration status, right? And be able to stay in the country. That's possible if people are getting their day in court, but they're not. That's what's happening right now is we're seeing a lot of people aren't.
Yeah. And again, I said I didn't want to get anecdotal in this, but I have heard stories of ICE agents literally like waiting outside of immigration attorneys' offices to grab people on their way in or out to speak to their lawyer, which is just insane to me that someone is trying to do it the quote unquote right way, and instead of giving them that opportunity, you're going to say, nope, time to go, or we're at least going to detain you to try to get you deported. It's just... Yeah,
one of the craziest things that went on recently in the immigration all across the country is that people are being punished for showing up to their immigration court hearings. Yeah. Right? So say they got their day in court and the judge says, yes, you qualify for this defense from deportation. We're going to set you up for a series of hearings until your final hearing, and then we'll make a decision, right? And people, that can take years, right? And so in the meantime, if they don't have any violent criminal history, if the government determines they're not a flight risk in general, they can be non-detained and living outside in their community with their family or their friends and stuff like that, right? But they still have to keep checking in with ICE. They still have to be going to these immigration court hearings, right? But what we've been seeing is that the people are showing up to immigration court for these hearings, doing it quote unquote the right way, right? And ICE is waiting in the lobby of the immigration court. They're waiting right outside of the immigration court. The government in court is saying, hey, we are deciding that we are no longer going to prosecute this immigration case. Judge, we're not going to try to deport them through these removal proceedings, these deportation proceedings in court. You can dismiss this case. And they will dismiss the case. The judges will dismiss the case. And as soon as they step foot outside, ICE picks them up to be deported without the same procedural protections as the courts that they were in. So again, it's this tactic of the government stripping away, right, the rights that the people have, or the status or the protections that the people have, and then pointing a finger at them and saying, hey, you're in here unlawfully. But they did it themselves, right? It's horrendous.
Yeah, it makes me so upset. Like I don't want this to be a completely negative podcast, right? I want this to be a conversation that maybe does have a little bit of hope. So to wrap this up, what would you say to anybody out there who is maybe right now currently afraid of deportation, who has someone that they love who could be deported? Like, what would your advice, what would your words be to them if they were here in front of you? What would you tell anybody right now who is watching the news and seeing all of this stuff going on? What would you tell them if they're coming?
Yeah, and I want to preface this by saying this isn't legal advice, right? These are my opinions. But I think educate yourself, know the rights. Right. If we have time, I'm happy to do a quick little debrief of important rights that everyone has that they should know.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
You have the right to remain silent. Right. Obviously, you don't have to answer any questions at any traffic stop or anything, or any stop by ICE. You have the right to remain silent and request your lawyer. tell them you have a lawyer or request a lawyer, and tell them you don't want to speak to anyone unless you have a lawyer present. If ICE comes knocking at your door, you have the right not to answer the door. Speak to them through the door, through, you know, the little, keep the chain on the door, speak to them through a crack or whatever. They cannot enter your home unless they have a judicial warrant signed by a federal judge. Sometimes they'll present what's called an administrative warrant, and you'll know because the title is there. It'll either say judicial warrant or administrative warrant. An administrative warrant is not enough for them to come into you and grab you, enter your home, right? Yeah, you have the right to remain silent, ask for your attorney. You don't have to answer the door for them, and plan with your family. Do that. Have those difficult conversations and those worst case scenarios. Nobody enjoys doing that, but it's absolutely necessary for you to have a safety plan in the event that you or someone you love gets picked up by ICE, right? And have a plan, know what you're going to do, know what the next steps are, as difficult as it might be to predict or plan that out. It's important to stay informed, talk to people, you know, if you have children and you could be at risk, you know, talk to your community members, your friends, your family, those who do have protected status, and create that contingency plan for your family to be taken care of in your absence. And share this information and share the resources with those that you care about, with your community. Stand up for people that you care about, right? If you are a witness to something like this, to encounters by ICE, record and put it out there. And share your knowledge with Sam. Like I was, you know, we talked previously about that lady who was saying, don't open the door in Spanish, right? Yeah. Do stuff like that. That's great. You know, help your community members out. I've seen already a ton of TikToks where people are recording and saying, hey, Mesa, Arizona, this blue Chevy SUV is ICE. Look at them. They're getting in. Here's a license plate number, right? Not illegal to do that. You can totally share that and put people aware of where they're at and what they're driving, and so that they can be safe, right? Educate, empower, and donate. If you can, donate some cash, donate some time, whatever it is. Don't lose hope. I mean, you know. Yeah.
There are people out there who want to help you. Obviously, we have one of them here with it. Well, all of us in this room currently are you know, here to help, but obviously we don't all have the training and education as our guest host does. So there are people who are in this country who will fight for you, who will fight with you. I think a beautiful thing that we can take away from this is the fact that when you watch those, when you watch all the videos of the protests going on in specifically LA, it's just because people aren't going to take this lying down anymore. You know, a lot of people are equating this to things like I've seen comparisons of ICE to the Gestapo, you know, during World War II. And back in the 40s or 30s, people weren't gonna go against the government. Obviously that wasn't something that was going to happen. In 2025 in America, people aren't gonna just allow the government to do this to innocent people. So I think you can take some solace in knowing that people are going to fight for you. There are people, hundreds of thousands of people, who aren't just going to follow the status quo, who aren't just going to accept what the government has to say. People are out there fighting for your rights to, you know, humanity, to live somewhere where you can feel safe and provide for your families. And I think that's one positive thing that I've taken from this, is the other people's willingness to stand up to these corrupt policies and politicians. Again, no one's going to just take this lying down anymore. So I want to just highlight that, because again, this is a very serious conversation. There's a lot of negative, which, you know, it's scary right now for if you're someone who's here, you know, undocumented. So just know that there are people who are here who will fight with you and for you.
Yeah, and in my opinion, we should, those folks should leave the fight, the aggressive or the risk taking, to the people, to us, right?
Yeah,
to the people
who aren't at risk.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Right. If you know you're at risk, as much as you love the community, as much as you hate what's going on right now, a protest is not the place for you to be doing what you can to serve the community.
Absolutely.
Right? Stay home, stay safe, contribute in other ways. There are plenty of ways to contribute.
Absolutely. Good point. Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I think that was a great conversation. I think that was a great way to, like you said, share the information, share the knowledge. If you're a listener out there and you know someone who has been worried about these things, please share this episode. You know, just helping get this information out could help someone. So, thank you again, Eddie, for donating your time to us today here on the podcast. We really appreciate it. Like I said earlier, links to some of the organizations that he mentioned will be in the show notes. So if you guys want just a quick place to access those and to see what you can do, jump down there and check those out. But thank you again. And we're going to close this one out. So until next time, my name's Adonis.
I'm Matt.
I'm Luis.
And I'm Eddie.
Thanks.
Thanks, man.
Thank you.
Speak Easy is recorded at Grizzly Voices Studios in Mesa, Arizona. Our producers are Adonis Ship, Matthew Gowan, and Luis Herrera. Our theme music is Falling by Mislo. Our editor and sound engineer is Adonis Ship.